All right, what's going on? It has been a while. Probably like a lot of you, I have taken not necessarily a break from NGS, but definitely haven't put a lot of time in for various reasons. Not being able to solo Darkfall Solace being pretty much the big issue. And the purpose of today's video, well, we're going to discuss how do we fix Techter. And I use fix purposefully because we're not really talking about buffing Techter. We're not going to be adding anything. We're just going to be discussing what Techter currently has and how do we fix it. And I think what you'll be surprised is that there's a lot of things that we can do with Techter's current kit, specifically its skill tree, which this video is going to be about, that can go a long way into fixing the class. What is Techter's biggest issue? And it's actually fairly simple, and it comes down to synergy and reward structure. So what do I mean by synergy? Well, we look at, for example, Wand Reflect, Wand Parry Counter. They synergize with Wand Element Revoke and Wand Element Pursuit. Why? Because in using those abilities, aka Photonic Fury, to different degrees, build your Wand Element Pursuit meter, which allows you to use Wand Element Pursuit, which is a main damage dealer for Techter. And essentially, since the skill existed, your entire rotation and how you attack and how you play the class revolves around Wand Element Pursuit. What's broken is that there really is no reward structure when you play towards that core mechanic. So you might be asking, well, what do you mean by reward structure? And so what I want to do is I want to bring in Bouncer, specifically jet boots. We're going to focus on jet boots, but I do understand that the current way that Bouncer has been tuned is that you want to look at the class as a whole. So when you're playing Bouncer, you're going to be playing both soaring blades or dual blades and jet boots. And doing that effectively essentially is not only the synergy, but the reward structure. But what I want to focus on for this example, to really get an understanding of what I mean reward structure, is that I want to look at Jet Sweep Jolt. Why is Jet Sweep Jolt so important? Well, in the recent update, and I want to say back in August, it's been, like I said, it's been a while. But in the recent update, it got a power boost. But it also has a lot of other things going for it outside of the power boost. That is Jet Sweep Jolt PP save. So after using Jet Sweep for 20 seconds, you've got reduced PP consumption. Additionally, the big thing that really hit was Jet Sweep Rapid Boost. And what this does is that after using Jet Sweep, your Photon Art attack speed increases. Depending on the Photon Art, it's about 10 to 15 second attack speed boost, which is huge. And then of course you have Jet Sweep Jolt Short Cooldown, which is when you successfully dodge or counter using the Jet Boot weapon action, the cooldown is reduced. When you look at Jet Boots, the direction that it's going is that it's being played around Jet Sweep. How do you build Jet Sweep? Well, you build it by attacking or you build it by dodging, such as your Boot Trick Counter, your Jet Extra Attack, your Jet Intensity, the damage you do from your Jet Boot element set. The goal is to effectively and quickly build Jet Sweep, use Jet Sweep, so that you get these bonuses such as attack speed, PP consumption, and keep those bonuses up for the entire duration of the fight. So the more effective you are in using Jet Sweep, the more effective you are overall. That is essentially the reward structure. And while it's not the best per se, as Soaring Blades, aka Dual Blades, is still the better weapon, it is still increased the effectiveness with Jet Boots. You can solo Darkfall Solace with Jet Boots. It has been done at least once, if not twice. Of course, I understand that Bouncer in its current state is meant to use both Dual Blades and Jet Boots. And once again, the reward structure is consistent sustained damage that is heightened by things such as Jet Sweep and Pinion Blade. So, now that we kind of understand the concept of a reward structure, let's look back at Techter. We're going to ignore our top row of skills. These are just kind of your common skills, whatever. What I want to focus on is that we've got 4 main sections. The first section is your technique section, that I'll call it, where we have our compound techniques and our elemental gimmicks or our blots, like our barter blot, make it sphere, so have you. Then our next tier or category, however you want to look at it, tiers might seem like there's an order or ranking, is shifting. And then from there, we have our wand tier, and then our 4th tier is our talus. And we're not going to worry about talus for now, though it has its own issues because of our reward structure as well. The current issue is that if we look at the technique tier, the shifted tier, and the wand tier, they are not connected. And this is the main issue with Techter that at least I'm seeing right now. If we're going to fix Techter, we've got to fix this. Shifta, it's actually a good thing that it's not connected because Shifta is very passive, and we don't really want to design this class around Shifta. We've learned that Shifta is a curse when it comes to Techter as a solo playing class. To balance around that, as we've seen not only in NGS but also in PSO2 base, this is a detriment. So it's a good thing that things aren't connected to Shifta because usually bad things happen. So what we want to focus on, the technique tier and the wand tier. Once again, we're also going to ignore Talus. What is, once again, Techter's Jet Sweep Jolt? What is that skill, that ability that we are essentially playing around, that we want to have up as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and using it as effectively as possible? That is Wand Element Pursuit. What happens when you build Wand Element Pursuit and you use it? Well, you do burst damage, which is a good thing. It's a plus, it's a positive, but it's just damage, right? What else happens? You lose your element. What does that mean when you lose your element? Well, let's look at some of these skills. We've got Weak Element Amplifier. Increases your photon blast gauge when you attack the enemy weakness, the element weakness. So, in using Element Pursuit, you lose access to this skill. What is also lost to some degree, your compound techniques or your united techniques on the global server, specifically Compound Tech Gauge Amplifier. The minute you use Revoke or Wand Element Pursuit, these two skills turn off. What is the other issue? Well, I got to get my element back, right? If I have not built a blot, when I cast a charge technique, it is naturally a DPS loss. Now, of course, if you followed my other videos, check out Spellblade, which is essentially using uncharged techniques as a combat tool instead of using your photon arts like Wave Crash, so that you can build blot while also using your wand counter to build element pursuit, and then using that blot to regain the element while not being at a DPS loss. But if you are not using that, or you do not have the blot, in regaining element so that you can use Wand Element Pursuit again down the road is a DPS loss. In using Wand Element Pursuit, which is essentially the core of our gameplay, especially as Wand, when you use it, you are not rewarded like you are Jet Sweep Jolt. You are not even on par to where you were. You have lost skills and abilities. You are less efficient unless you play things a certain way, and even then, that's not guaranteed. This is one of the main issues with Techter. None of these skills, other than the skills that belong in the tiers technically, talk to each other. They don't play off of each other. You're not being rewarded for playing the game the way it's designed, or for playing the class the way it's designed, and for playing it well, and for making good decisions. No matter how well you play, the minute you use this, you have effectively put yourself at a disadvantage. How do we fix this? We have to build in a reward structure. What needs to happen? Well, once again, Wand Element Pursuit is our reward structure. You should receive something. You should gain something when using Wand Element Pursuit. What should that be? It should be your elemental blots. So for example, if I have Ice Element and I use Wand Element Pursuit on an enemy or enemies, those individuals are now tagged with Barter Blot. If I have Lightning, they're now tagged with Zombie Clad, Megasphere, so on and so forth. So that becomes the game. Why is this important? I've used Wand Element Pursuit. I've put myself at a disadvantage. Some of my skills essentially turn off. I'm less effective. The reward for playing the game and playing the weapon correctly is you've got an elemental block. You can reapply element without being at a DPS loss. Congratulations. While we haven't really gained much per se, we'll get into that, we have at least closed off our core gameplay not punishing us. We have a reward structure that at least keeps us even. Why is this such a great idea? Well, for a lot of people, and this is since the beginning of NGS, Techter players could never understand why their wand photon arts never applied element mechanic. And from my perspective, I think the reason that never happened is because you get into some very dangerous territory. It gets on the realm of maybe this is a little too overtuned. Being able to build blots might be too easy to access from a power standpoint. With that said, I don't believe that Spellblade is intentional either. I don't think Techter was really designed to say, hey, you should be using uncharged techniques while also building one element pursuit, because you can't build one element pursuit with techniques. And so while it makes sense numerically now because of the recent tech buffs, that's an unintentional design, and it really takes away from one element pursuit, because in doing that, you can't build this as fast as possible. The only reason why we're doing it is because it just makes sense damage-wise. Now that one element pursuit in its execution applies a blot or builds a blot, indirectly that means our photon arts now build the blots. If one element pursuit builds blots and your wand technique, specifically photonic furies, wand parry counter, so on and so forth, build one element pursuit, then if A builds B and B builds C, then A builds C. So, and having one element pursuit build blots, essentially our photon arts are building blots. And so now there's a synergy between photon arts, techniques, so on and so forth. Starts closing that loop. The other issue that we have, and this is interesting because Force doesn't have this issue, is that we get nothing from using our compound techniques. And what do I mean by that? This is actually something that many of you might not know, because if you don't play Force, you wouldn't know. Rod Attack Impact. This is a new skill that Force got in version 2. After hitting enemies with techniques, you build a gauge. Once that gauge fills, your normal attacks now apply element damage based on the last technique that you casted. Not only does it do decent damage, which is going to get buffed in a week, but it also applies the block. So why are we talking about Rod Attack Impact? Well, your compound techniques instantly build Rod Attack Impact. So we're going to use Maggot Sphere as an example, just because Maggot Sphere is very, very simple. You hit 3 Maggot type attacks, you build spheres around you. When you cast a charge Maggot technique, you use those spheres to do additional damage in that charge technique. So you can imagine a situation to where you have Maggot Spheres, you cast Maggot Sphere for additional damage, you then build that back up quickly with your Rod Impact normal attacks to eventually do Maggot Sphere again. You can do it again because Rod Impact is 6 normals. And then when you are out, and let's say you're not, and we're going to ignore that you're using Element Bullet because there's also interactions there. If I were to use Fomelgion, my compound technique, I get another 6 Rod Impacts. So you can imagine, and this is simple, and you wouldn't do this because there's other things that you can use, but just focusing purely on Rod Impact, you can go Maggot Sphere, 3 Rod Impacts, Maggot Sphere, another 3 Rod Impacts, Maggot Sphere, compound technique Fomelgion. Fomelgion gives you not only more Rod Impacts, but it gives you full Maggot Sphere. And then Rod Impact 3 more times, full Maggot Sphere, Rod Impact 3 more times, full Maggot Sphere. So there's synergy and reward structure for building Rod Impact and also for building compound techniques. Now, of course, time will tell how good a reward structure this is, because we know right now Rod Impact's damage is lacking. In the coming weeks or coming days, that is going to be increased. The potency is going to be increased. How much, we won't know. They're improving the reward structure. When we look at Techter's compound techniques, this does absolutely nothing. And you would think that, maybe this should automatically rebuild one element pursuit. Why? Because the reward structure is I'm playing towards my core ability. I want to efficiently and effectively build compound techniques and use them in the ideal situation. In doing that, I'm rewarded with additional damage. In doing that, I am playing into my class's core strength. And then, of course, in doing that, it gives me additional bonuses, or at least it keeps me on par. I am being rewarded, and I am never at a disadvantage for effectively using my class's kit the way it was designed optimally. Right now, the only thing you get for Techter when using your core abilities, which is like Wand Element Pursuit, and we'll say Compound Technique for the sake of argument, is damage. But after you use that, you are essentially having to rebuild yourself. So even though you've done relatively great damage, it's not that great when you look at things like Jet Sweep, Jolt, or Pinion Blade, and the uptime that these things can have when played effectively. You're having to rebuild yourself up, so you're actually losing some of that damage, and that needs to be fixed. And now you might be thinking, whoa, if you allow Compound Techniques to build Wand Element Pursuit, and you allow Wand Element Pursuit to build blots, is that overtuned? And what I want to say is that no, it's not, because, believe it or not, element weakness is a big deal. Not doing element weak damage to an enemy is impactful. And so, for example, we can use Vignogia, Zepheto, as an example of if we were to put all of this together. So for example, let's say during a down or during a break, you use revoke. And once again, Zeph is weak to lightning. So immediately when you've used revoke, you have built your Zombie Clad. So now I can choose to use the Zombie Clad or I can save it. But once again, this is a down state and I've actually built 2 stocks of Compound Technique and I've been saving them for this break. So what do? I'm actually going to use Baranstian because I want to build a Barter Blot, but I also want to automatically build another 1 element pursuit. As Baranstian is going off, I trigger my Zombie Clad because I want to put the element lightning back on my wand so that I can use 1 element pursuit at the end of Baranstian. So now Baranstian has finished. I have Barter Blot because, and I also have Brand's Glitter, but we'll just focus on Barter Blot because Baranstian automatically gives me Barter Blot. So what do I want to do? I want to revoke again. Why? Because I want to do that damage because I've automatically built 1 element pursuit from my Compound Technique, and I want to re-engage Zombie Clad. Barter Blot is applied to the enemy. Now I'm going to use Fomelgian because I want to rebuild my 1 element pursuit while also building Megasphere. And so after Fomelgian, once again, I've got Zombie Clad waiting. I've got 1 element pursuit. I'm going to use Zombie Clad, animation cancel, which increases its DPS, into 1 element pursuit. What does that do again? It gives me another Zombie Clad. I'm going to use Barter Blot, and then I'm going to use Megasphere. And then I'm going to use Zombie Clad again to make sure the element returns to lightning. Now, believe it or not, in this example, you might say like, this is crazy. But if you do the math, that entire combination without main class damage, because we won't worry about that, it's about 565 DPS. And it's going to take you about 19 seconds to pull all of that off. So chances are, in most down situations, you won't be able to do that. You'll have to figure out what's the best situation. And so in this fix that I'm proposing, I haven't overloaded the class. You're not doing a ridiculous 700 DPS over the course of 20 seconds, which is crazy. You're doing 565, which is pretty reasonable, especially all the things that go into it. Barter Blot and Megasphere are still DPS efficient. They're still DPS positive, but they're not as powerful because they don't have the element weakness damage applied to them. And so that's how it controls these things. But once again, I'm sustaining damage and even improving my damage, but I'm not overloading it by tying 1 element pursuit to the blots. Additionally, I'm not losing the efficiency of keeping my wand element and then keeping these bonuses such as weak amplifier and weak yell, because every time I use 1 element pursuit, I'm getting that element's clad back, or that element's blot back. And then tying up the loose ends with compound techniques, rewarding me for using them, not just in damage, but also efficiencies, tying it back into 1 element pursuit. And so it's simply doing these 2 things. I have woven these 2 tiers of skills together. I have created a reward structure that doesn't overload or inflate the class, and it gives them a lot of options while removing the detriments. And so in the next video we'll get more into other things these skills might benefit from that are more in line with buffs, such as other things we should get after using 1 element pursuit, potentially other things we get from using compound techniques. What the hell do we do with wand lovers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and just about this fix and also other things, especially you Techter mains, might need to be considered. But other than that, I know some of you have been waiting for the wand guide. I'm making a Techter guide, but really it's a wand guide. It's pretty much written. I've just been lazy getting around to finishing it and trying to figure out how to disseminate it. Also, I'm also waiting for some October updates to see what changes, but it looks like Techter's not going to get any changes, so I might just get to finishing that guide and getting out there, and then hopefully it does change in December when we actually get something. But once again, thanks for sticking around. I know I haven't been back, but hopefully there'll be more content soon. I'll catch you all next time.